Nigeria's national electricity grid has collapsed yet again. This has thrown several cities, including the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, into darkness. It is the sixth reported collapse in 2022, although some said the figure could be higher. The government blames poor management and low gas supply as the major causes of the repeated breakdown. Now we have someone in the studio who is going to throw light on that. And I mean, he knows a lot about this, and we believe that at the end of the discussion, Nigerians will be better informed about the situation. His name is Engineer Michael Oluwagbemi. He's a member of the board of the Rural Electrification Agency of Nigeria. We'll hope to get someone from the ministry as well. But for now, Mr. Michael, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Well, here we are again.
It's not been long that we had the last discussion. National grid collapsing. Some said it's the fourth time. Some said it's the sixth time. In fact, on social media, we saw it's the 17th time. And so we are not even sure of when the grid has collapsed and when it has not, because it looks like it is same darkness, that we've been experiencing, whether it has collapsed or whether, it's almost like there's no difference. So again, I wouldn't want to ask, why are we having this experience? Because you've answered that before. But should we continue in this path?
Good morning again to your viewers, and thanks for once again having me on your program. I think prior to my new title, I've been here before talking severally about power from just a professional perspective. And it is true that Nigerians are fed up with persistent collapse of the grid. And the issues, we've trashed it out severally on this program. No, it should not continue, and it should not be tolerated because the national power infrastructure is not just an engine for economic growth, as you know. It also has consequences when it comes to national security. It does not bode well when the largest economy in Africa experiences power collapse to as low as 8 megawatts as it did 2 nights ago. Mischief makers can take advantage of those kind of opportunities to wreak havoc on the nation. So we should take the security, sanctity of the nation very seriously, and as a result of that, the issues surrounding this grid needs to be resolved, either by completely rethinking the way the system has been designed, which is something I've advocated for on this program before, or which can be achieved by various means, including a new regulatory framework, which can be aggressively pursued by the NARC, or we can also, in the short to medium term, introduce some potentially very expensive redundancy into the system, which can be done by, for example, providing what we call spinning power, which essentially is power that is always available on the grid, regardless of whether they are used or not. So spinning power, which sometimes is provided by large static battery banks, can be introduced. But again, the problem is it's expensive. I don't see, instead of me doing a spinning reserve, I might have 1 or 2 other things I could do on the regulatory side that can begin to untangle the long-term problems.
My question to you is this. This is the 4th collapse this year.
Yeah.
In March, it collapsed twice.
Yes.
In April, it collapsed. And what has been done between then and now?
The answer is basically mostly nothing. The solution to this problem is not an overnight solution. Even any of the 2 solutions I just told
Yes, but is anything on the table? Has anything been started?
I wouldn't know, to be honest. I know that there was discussions around acquiring. I know there was tender out last year for acquiring spinning reserves for the country. And I do not know how far that has gone. Again, we also have the public procurement law that also underline and guides how to acquire this kind of facility. But the net of it, the reality of it is that it is not tolerable that the national grid should continue to go down. But it was predictable, right? If I tell you something is not tolerable, and I say we should not be living with it. But the other part of it is that this was predictable. Why is it predictable? You have not spent the required sums of money and investment to strengthen your national grid. And all over the world, we know what it takes to strengthen national grids over time for the large size of population we have. I mean, if you live in Abuja alone, I mean, just look at, to get to this place today, from where I live took me about 30 minutes. I can tell you when I first moved to Abuja 10 years ago, the same journey would have taken me 10 minutes, right? I mean, because the number of people that live in Abuja have gone up astronomically. and I'm not here factoring the number of people that are even using the national grid, which is continuing to geometrically increase. So you need to invest in that infrastructure. You can't just expect it to continue to give you what it used to give you just because it's there.
Who is supposed to sink in that money?
That money should come from all the participants, but primarily it comes from the disco end. So the distribution companies are the ones that collect electricity bills and then distribute it, the income. They don't just distribute electricity, they also distribute income back into the system. They are the ones that are at the port of bill collection. So anything around metering, anything around collecting the bills from the consumers. It is from that amount of money, there's a certain allocation that is set aside for Transmission Company of Nigeria, which is TCN, which is the one experiencing this particular grid collapse. But the reality is that TCN, you and I do not interact with TCN. TCN exists at the mercy of the bills collected by the discos. And the discos on the report or loses power because as a result of not metering their customers, then they do not remit the necessary amount of money to TCN so that TCN can invest in the network. And these have been going on again, not for 10 years, not for 20 years. It's been going
So
on
you
for
said
a
it's
long
the discos that are supposed to put back this money into
Yes,
it.
yes.
Are they doing that? Do you know?
The recovery rates has improved in the last 1.5 years, but prior to that, sometimes was as low as 20%. But even this improvement, I'm telling you, maybe it has risen to maybe 50%. That means 50% of the power that we inject in the national grid. And after it is distributed, are we able to require or remit the amounts of money that is necessary to generate them? This is poor. So that means for every 2 megawatts, only 1 megawatt gets paid for. And so there's still, if I continue to invest 50% less, I mean, the other day it was the Gencos that went on, essentially said they didn't have money for paying for gas anymore because they were not getting the required level of remittance. At the point of turning gas molecules into electrons, you have made an investment in buying gas. And the gas guy says, I want $1 whatever by MM score for my gas in order for you to be able to generate electricity. And now you're only able to pay him back 50 cents. At some point, the guy is going to say, I'm not going to keep supplying you gas. And when the guy stops supplying you gas, there's a certain leg of the ecosystem of electric production and transmission and distribution that becomes weak. And when it becomes weak, it collapses. So you don't just lose the advantage of having the additional 100, 200 megawatts that gas station could have provided. The entire system then collapses at once. So this occurs all the time. There are various reasons why system collapse occurs. We do not know this particular reason. I mean, again, the TCN themselves will have to tell us these are the reasons why.
They haven't yet spoken on it.
No,
Exactly, because sometimes we always hear, oh, the grid has collapsed, but no one ever says this is why it has collapsed. Yes, we understand that as Nigerians, we may not, even if we know the reason why it collapsed, all we want is just to see, power. But at least knowing the reason, would help Nigerians, will guide Nigerians, thinking as to what is responsible for the problem, and then know where to channel their energy.
The honest truth is that there will be many reasons, but every reason will lead back to what I'm telling you. The deficit of financing to upgrade and maintain a national grid of the size, system, and configuration we've designed for ourselves. So the question is two things. So either you redesign the system to face the reality of how you're paying, or you decide to go and...
So if the discos are supposed to pay a certain amount, right? And they're not doing that, isn't there a regulatory body that is supposed to say, hey...
There is. So, and that's it. And this is something that we've discussed many times even on here, that I think that the NERC should be a little more aggressive with the discos on one hand. But the second part of it is that I think NERC can be a little aggressive and be more innovative in the design of its own rules so that it can reconfigure, use rules. You can use rules and regulation to redesign the system. And I use the example of the banking system the last time I was on here, talking about how Professor Soludo used bank consolidation guideline and regulation to redesign the Nigerian banking system. Basically what he did was to say, look, the Nigerian banking system is not deep, wide, far, in order to be able to sustain the level or the size of our economy. And in order for me to be able to have a bank that is as big, as robust, in order to be able to sustain this economy, I need to have the banks consolidate. So he decided to have I mean, it's a rule-making process. Yes, it might take you 6 months, it might take you 1 year, it might take you 2 years. But once the rules are made by, these businesses are regulated, banks are regulated, power stations are regulated, or the power industry is a regulated business. It's not just capitalism, embracing capitalism. So what you can do is you can be innovative. I mean, the word here is innovative. I'm not saying that it is just a rule that you're going to take from the shelf, a standard rule, and apply it. But in this case, we have a particular situation in our country. This particular situation in our country today is that the person producing the gas molecules do not see through as to how his gas molecules is becoming electricity, is becoming ultimately distributed, and the money come back to them. And as a result, you're talking about the 3,750 or thereabout that we lost last 2 days ago as a result of the system collapse. Nobody's talking about the almost 3,000, 4,000, which we produce that we don't even inject. I mean, the sheer waste. I mean, you're not even, so aside from the fact that you have 3,750 megawatts, of which maybe only 1,750 or 2,000 of it is being paid for, right? You also have another 3,000 that is outside of this 3,750 that is being produced, that is not even being
that they don't take.
So it is almost criminal. You know, it is, to me, it is almost, I don't know the word to use, the level of waste that we are sustaining in the power sector. And all of us are somewhat accepting it as a reality. But when we know that an innovative rule-making process, which the NERC can initiate, and they are independent, just like the CBN. I keep saying this, we have people that have jobs that need to do their job. That's where we are here. So they are independent.
So
they
now,
need to
now
do
this lack of ingenuity, is it because of lack of, expertise, or is it just the political will to do the right thing?
I mean, you're not supposed to be politicians as regulators. Regulators are not supposed to be politicians.
No, they will.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, any will has to be adduced first and foremost to, do you understand the assignment? The assignment as NERC, for crying out loud, is not to ensure that discos and gencos are nice to each other and nice to you. You are the police. It's like the Nigerian police force. The assignment to Nigerian people, when we tell them to police us as regulators, is to ensure that we all behave ourselves and ensure that we all have a peaceful society. So they are the police of the power sector. So they must wield out the big stick. They must wield out the big stick. And in wielding out the big stick, if it requires that a couple of people should be, or a couple of entities should become casualties, then so be it.
Now, the NERC itself is a government functionary.
Yes.
We've had several cases where, MDAs, even government facilities, are culprits, are guilty of not paying for power that they consume and all of that. So is the hands of the NERC tight if you look at that? Because sometimes it gets so very high.
No, not really. To be honest with you, it used to be a problem, but it's not as big of a problem as it used to be. If there's anything, the government has shown good faith when it comes to this issue around paying, especially the federal government. I can't talk about the state government because there are so many of them, and local government. I mean, when we talk about government in Nigeria, we tend to forget that there are 801 of them, right? The 774, 36 local governments, federal government, 802 actually, and FCT. So the federal government, at least when it comes, I remember that about 2 years or 3 years ago, the federal government made bulk payments on behalf of the military, made bulk payments on behalf of MDAs. MDAs are encouraged to pay. Now, if you look at the national budget for last 2 or 3 years, you are beginning to see line items for payment of backlog of power owed to the discos, right? And let us also remember that by and large, even beyond this, the federal government had continually provided facilities from the central bank to subsidize the discos, even despite the fact that they are by and large 60% owned by the private sector. And let us also remember that the federal government just went to borrow $12 billion from Siemens in order to be able to, through Siemens and the German government and a host of European funders, in order to be able to strengthen the DISCO network, even though the federal government and state government and local government own about just 40% of these companies. So in terms of what the federal government should do, if you net, I mean, if you net out the fact that they borrowed $12 billion on behalf of Nigeria for them to use to develop their private system, about 2-3 trillion naira so far in terms of support to CBN, and the fact that they've also made them pay a lot of money, I don't see the moral culpability as much as it used to be. I see here is an inability to innovate.
Okay.
The NARC has to innovate this rule, and the rule is. And let me retreat because a lot of people ask me, what am I talking about? It's very simple. Every GENCO, every DISCO must own a GENCO within their DISCO area. Very simple. It's like consolidation. I'm saying you must have an end-to-end company. You cannot just be a DISCO. Why is that important? Suddenly, if you own a DISCO, one, the first thing is that you have to go and acquire capital. You cannot just own a DISCO, you have to buy it. That immediately puts an incentive on you as a business owner, number one, to go and raise investment. Two, it also gives you an incentive to stop monkeying around with the whole remittance issue, because now you must bring money on the table to buy something. So you solve a certain moral culpability here, a kind of moral paradox, and try to use a rule to solve it in the first instance. The second thing is that now that you are the owner of a DISCO that is within your catchment area, you can now use that GENCO, you can now use that GENCO, expand that GENCO to directly put power into your system without having to go through this national grid thing. Yola DISCO can have a bunch of GENCOs, a GENCO in Yola area, in the northeast area. Over there you have solar, you have Mambila will be quickly brought to life because suddenly Yola can have the entire Mambila 2,000, 3,000 megawatts. The guys in Kaduna DISCO can quickly bring in Shiroro and bring in, what's it called, Jeba Dam. The folks, and they can put in some solar. The folks in a Jaws and as well as the Abuja DISCO, you go to Gerigu, which has gas, and you can expand Gerigu from what it currently is.
So why are they not doing this? Why are they not doing it?
Again, you are looking at an issue where we are comfortable. We are comfortable as a people with just the status quo. We are comfortable because, again, we are comfortable as a people with wasting 3,000 megawatts of power. There's a certain amount of power currently.
But shouldn't the GENCOs, I mean, if this is the solution, shouldn't the GENCOs be pushing for this, looking at the fact that they are at the losing end in most of the cases?
Because everybody is holding an IOU against you and I. That's a secret.
What does that mean?
It means whether they produce or they don't produce, almost all of them get some kind of documentation that said, I produced this amount of money. And in the future, just like the Paris Club refunds, you will get a refund done by the government of this country against your name and my name.
So money is taken from government coffers and paid for the wasted.
It will eventually.
For the wasted.
It is not done today. All they are doing today is they are tabulating numbers. At some point in the future, there will be some kind of reckoning, and it's going to be an accounting reckoning. So, and against a large amount of national assets or some kind of loan that we're borrowing from somebody or some kind of revenue that came in suddenly, a windfall.
So if I get you properly, it's not as if the situation in Nigeria is something beyond us. It's just because certain people have refused to do their work.
It is because we as a people, again, I want to be very careful. We as a people are comfortable with the status quo. It is not that it's not a solvable problem, as I've already explained. In fact, both for the long term and the short term, you can solve some problems around grid collapse. But the first thing is, can we reimagine our grid? We want this fantasy grid that works as a whole, but the reality is that the whole is weak. Can we as a people first focus on putting power into where it is, from where it is being produced to where it is needed? I've explained there's virtually no DISCO in Nigeria today that potentially cannot develop, even if it does not have it. I think the only one today that doesn't have an existing GENCO is Yola, the one in the northeast. Almost every, and of course, I was saying that Mambila will come and all that. There's even plans to build one inside of it. But on the whole, almost every GENCO in Nigeria today, DISCO in Nigeria today, have some GENCO that's associated or close by. And yet, even within that, for example, in Calabar and all of them, they still have IPPs that are spinning out. that are not injecting power because they are waiting to get this massive equipment and this massive platform to inject power into a massive national grid that is weak. How about we just start with taking the power and taking it to the city of Port Harcourt, city of Aba, city of Calabar?
Without going to the
We
national
don't have
grid.
to do all of these things. And you can resolve this, you can incentivize that by making and providing the right rules to encourage that to happen. Again, we cannot exclude the power of, there's a reason why a regulator exists. If the CBN, as a regulator of banks, did not make a move on consolidation, Nigeria will still have 130-something mushroom banks today. And all of us will still be comfortable with our status quo. If it was just a rule-making process, they took Soludo to court, they went to National Assembly, people made noise. I still know people who even, privately I know them, who still ate Soludo till today. He took my bank, he killed my bank. But he did it for national interest. There's some businesses that will die, no doubt. But in the net, is the banking industry stronger, better, deeper? Is the economy much better with consolidated banks than the way it used to be when we used to have failed banks every 6 months? Yes. So it's the same way. We cannot be nice. We can't be nice to all the 12 discos.
That means some of these discos do not have the capacity.
They don't. I mean, again, this problem started with the way we privatized the sector. It started with the way
Is it time to review that price, that whole privatization thing?
I think if I was just a fiat dictator, I would probably. But the truth is that we also operate a democracy. The court system we have, just say if you decide to go in there, and then they'll say, oh, you signed an agreement, you sold. Let us not even understand the risk of contagion to our banking system. A lot of these folks that bought these entities borrowed money from our banks. So if they go down, the deposit money banks, where the monies are borrowed from, also goes down. So it is not an easy problem. I'm not, by anybody listening to me should not think I'm trivializing the complexity of the problem. It is a very complex problem. But I think for us as people, first thing is to say, are we satisfied with what we have today? Are we satisfied with the level of waste? Are we satisfied with the level of collapse and unreliability of the so-called national grid system? Once we agree we are not, then let us create rules to allow it to
if
be,
you say the
to
people, if you say the people, in Nigeria it appears that there are, yes, same people but living in different worlds. You have the elites who are probably comfortable, who do not necessarily have the kind of need, to power their systems and all of that. And then on the other hand, you have Nigerians, who are actually struggling, living in darkness and all of that. So, for the members of that's for ordinary Nigerians. I don't like saying ordinary Nigerians, but I mean sometimes you are forced to, for better understanding.
For the message to be passed.
For the ordinary Nigerians, what are they expected to do, in this instance? Because apparently they are the ones that suffer most.
The truth is that when it comes to the issue of power, I don't really even think the elites are any better off than so-called ordinary Nigerians. The other day, 2 days ago, I was with a mentor of mine who you can call an elite of elite. Right? And he was complaining that for 1 day of consumption of diesel generator in his house, he spent 40,000 naira.
It's how much?
40,000 naira of diesel just for 1 day. And he said, look, I cannot sustain this. If I do 40,000 multiplied by 30, and I've not had power for about 10 days, so, and he doesn't have any hope of having power for the next 20, it's good enough for him to buy a new generator set. So I now suggested to him, hey, you have to do something about building a solar system for you. Right on the spot, he made commitment to go and get solar, and he was frustrated. So I don't think the issue, this thing they call infrastructure. The reason why it's called infrastructure is shared structure. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't discriminate. It's almost like air. It doesn't discriminate.
But it bites some people harder.
It sure does. The funny thing though is that even the rural poor, which I look over in the rural electrification, are probably even used to it already. They don't even. You're talking about they are used to that, the darkness, and as it were, we are trying to just get power to them, right? So I was just making that point to say that all of us are in this boat together. I would hate to begin to put the dichotomy of for Nigerian consumers, what should we do? Yes. I think that should be the first question, because we are all consumers. Even the government, like you said, I visited with the Northeast Joint Task Force in a military barracks in Maiduguri, with the guys fighting Operation Adinkai, fighting Boko Haram, and they don't have power. So it doesn't discriminate. The military is a consumer of power. So what should we do? What we should all do?
What should we do?
What should we should all do? Is NERC works for us. NERC works for us. The number one thing when you have a regulator and you are feeling a pain is all of us should bombard them with communications. We should bombard them like day and night. Their lines should be filled up, their telephone boxes, their letter boxes, the fronts of their offices should be filled with protest. We should demand. Again, because a lot of times it's because the thing looks so complicated. The reason why you have experts like me is to be able to guide you, to tell you that this is where you need to touch. If you look at the entire power system, there's NBET, there's DISCO, there's GENCO, there's TCN, there's Ministry of Power, there's this, there's REA.
So it looks
so complicated.
Yes.
But people like me will tell you, oh no, if you touch this one, you can get the desired effect. That's why I'm here. I mean, I'm sharing the knowledge that my country has blessed me with. I mean, my primary, secondary, and some part of my university education was in Nigeria. So I'm sharing with you what Nigeria has given to me.
So does this also depend, do we also have to look at this to also deal with issue of power for industrialization? Because yes, we talk about power for, consumers, domestic use and the rest of them, but, our economy also depend on this, for industrialization and all of that. Is there anything that we can do on the side? Yes,
there's a lot that can be done on the side. And I spoke to this when I said, there's two sides to it. There's economic and there's security, right? The economic side of this issue, that road also essentially goes through the regulator. They did something, which I have to commend them for. This was like 3 years ago when this agitation first started. When we talk about, willing buyer, willing seller. But we have not seen the execution. You see, there's also one thing. There's a difference between saying I have made a rule and then driving the execution of the rule. Implementation of the rule. Professor Soludo was not docile about implementing the consolidation of the banks. He gave them deadlines. He said if you are not, he didn't say, oh, you need to consolidate, and then he went to bed. No, he said if you are not consolidated by so and so date, you cease to be a bank. They thought he was playing. The man was not playing. He literally went and turned off the light to every single bank that did not obey the rule. This is what you need. You need a regulator with teeth. You need a regulator with teeth. So, like this willing buyer, willing seller rule, that rule basically says that if you have, for the purpose of industrial companies, if you have an hydropower, then the hydropower must can be sold directly over the distribution line, 33 kVA line, directly taken from this hydropower, directly to the industrial users. So for example, you can go to cement, a gas company, a factory, an industrial park, you can just take a 33 kVA line directly and bypass the entire national grid. And the discos and the consumers can agree the pricing. Now the question is, what was the price for not complying? Was it
the big stick?
Okay. Exactly. Has there been some kind of rule saying that if you do not sell your power or you do not do this as a disco, you're going to be penalized for every X amount of.
All right. I guess we'll have to answer that next time we have this discussion because of time. We will have to end this now. Thank you so much for joining us.